Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Let's begin first with this graphic, which was put together by the Storm Prediction Center, which is part of NOAA, and it shows you the number of days on average each year where we have severe winds coming from thunderstorms. Those are winds measured to be greater than 58 miles an hour. Okay. Now, typically, most meteorologists, when we think about where we have the most active squall line activity throughout the year, we are always thinking about parts of the Carolinas. You traditionally, historically, have a lot of very strong squall line type thunderstorms that come racing through this part of the country. So it was amazing to see the storm reports over the weekend showcasing a severe weather event that was far away from the Carolinas. In fact, going back to Saturday and Friday, that's what these two maps show. Look at this. Around a large ridge, bringing extreme heat to the middle part of the country, which then slid to the east over the weekend here. We had these ridge-riding thunderstorms that produced well in excess of 625 reports of severe weather. Some of those storms, well, take a look at them here on infrared satellite. And you're going, why are you showing me stuff outside of the Carolinas? Well, this particular cluster of thunderstorms, which started in the Dakotas, moved through Minnesota, and then right there blew up over Wisconsin and Michigan, did a lot of damage to a corn and soybean crop across this area. In fact, zooming in on the storms as they moved over the top of Wisconsin, the Anvil Cloud, that's the top of them, actually stretched to be the size of Wisconsin, Lake Superior, and Michigan all combined. It was a huge complex of thunderstorms where temperatures were hitting minus 80 degrees Celsius and colder at their very top. On visible satellite imagery, we can just see the tops of these storms bubbling away as their overshooting tops raced into the stratosphere. This is incredible to see. But this is maybe a radar image that if you didn't see the word Green Bay in it, you might think you see this a lot of times in North Carolina. And what are we looking at here? We're looking at two separate squall lines. One is here and one is there. And this second one, the more northerly one, even has a really well-defined what we call bookend vortex. When you see this shape on the radar, these lines of storms that bend forward, they're only doing that because of strong back-to-front flow we call the rear inflow jet. And some of these storms, if I switch over here to Doppler velocities, well, we saw winds in this pocket here exceeding 120 miles an hour, with some places getting up to 140 miles an hour. Now, those winds were not all the way down to the surface, but this squall line that raced across this part of the country did this to a lot of corn, and that's why we're talking about this. I want to thank Jeremy Hunt for putting this picture out on Twitter for all of us to see. This is green snap. And for you corn and soybean farmers in the Carolinas, I need you to know that this past several days, in addition to extreme heat in the midsection of the country, as also in the east, we had a lot of severe weather. And when we put it all together, look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. We can see, starting off in the south, these big ridge that's still sitting in the middle of the Atlantic, pumping the moisture around. And that's why we saw this whole corridor getting quite wet. So that's hitting a lot of peanut acres, that's hitting a lot of cotton acres. And this was just after, remember, Barry came right up through this area more than a week ago. Now, in parts of North Carolina, coastal North Carolina, of course, coastal South Carolina, you have seen some pretty extreme heat at the end of this last week without any rainfall, just hit or miss storms to your west. Meanwhile, big storms curling around that ridge on the northern side of it. Again, we call those ridge riders, going right through the middle part of the Corn Belt. But just like you were enduring heat, again, you corn and soybean farmers in the Carolinas, just take a look at this. Over the last 7 days, while that extreme heat was in the midsection of the country, yes, very wet in the northern tier, this was Barry here, but you can see big sections of the United States which endured very high evapotranspiration rates, extremely high temperatures, stressing corn, soybeans, cotton, all sorts of crops that we grow in the midsection of the country. Where you see those reds, those are places that missed out on this rain over the last week. So I'm trying to give you this whole U.S. perspective before we dive right in what's going on here in the Carolinas in the coming days, because it's very important, as this weather will probably be playing a story in the markets with time here. Now, what do the temperatures look like? Well, we're looking here at the last 5 days of temperature anomalies, and we can see where that heat was located here in the midsection of the country. Well, the question is, where is the heat going, and what does it mean in terms of our forecast moving forward? Starting off with our all hazards weather map, about the only place left in the U.S. still having heat advisories, extreme heat advisories here in the day on Monday is coastal North Carolina and parts of Virginia. But what I want you to see is what's right behind this. This particular area in through here has flood watch out for that area. We're going to be seeing a lot of stronger showers and thunderstorms moving through that corridor, pressing through North Carolina throughout the day. Now, coming back to this idea on heat, I just want to show you heat is just nothing new for us to be discussing this year. Take a look at the figure I just showed you here. This is the accumulated growing degree day units for Raleigh. And I'm just picking Raleigh as a representative area here. When you look at it, I want you to focus on this color line right in through here. That line represents the normal rate of accumulation, our historical average rate of accumulation of these growing degree day units. Now, if you follow the line that's got the shading underneath it, which ends right here, that particular line is 2019. Blue, 2017, that would be our most rapid accumulation of growing degree units. A lot of that was very early. And then the lowest was 1961, which is here. Now, what I want you to see is really beginning in April, we have just been on a path where we are accumulating these heat units much faster than the normal rate. And it's been very infrequent drops off in temperature where things have been nice and cool and comfortable, really since February, if you want to take it back that far. So, do we see change coming? The good news is yes. Take a look at this. Right now, our ridge is sliding in this direction, and it is now sitting like right here, out in the west. Pretty highly amplified flow, the ridge axis running right up here through Montana with a broader trough stretching in this area. Now, what does all this mean? Well, this means relief is on its way, and let's talk about that, okay? Currently, the position of the main front on which we're going to be watching storms is right in through this area. Big region of higher atmospheric pressure still funneling in that moisture. We're going to be talking about some tropical development right here in just a few minutes. But this cooler, drier air that is in place, yes, it is coming our way. Let's see when it gets here, okay? Over the next 5 days, look over here at the map on the left. This is looking at temperature anomalies from the European model. As the ridge goes west, look at the heat building west and into the Canadian prairies, while the eastern two-thirds of the country here is going to be seeing near average to below average temperatures. So welcome cool down is on its way. Just one more day of heat here in parts of North Carolina. Getting over into the day 5 through 10 time period, which is over here on the right, what we're going to be watching for is a much broader ridge spreading back from the west toward the east with time, which means we're going to go back from our cooler pattern into one that's got a little bit more heat. In the longer range, and I discuss all of this in my long-range weather forecasts at my.nutrienagsolutions.com. Again, that's my.nutrienagsolutions.com. Look at what happens by the time we get out here to the first week of August. We start to see the warmth really building back in. We've seen our global wind anomaly. In other words, we like to look at the whole atmosphere motion on the whole, and it's been slowing. We've had a collapse of our El Nino base state, which means we've moved over actually into La Nina-like wind patterns, which means our jet stream lengthens out, and we're going to have to watch very carefully for troughing over Alaska. Now you're saying, okay, I'm in the Carolinas. Why do I care about Alaska? Because in general, what happens in Alaska tends to be the opposite of what happens in the middle and eastern part of the country. So what we're saying here is that we have to pay close attention to this corridor to see how the flow pattern sets up for the rest of the United States. And what I want you to see is that in the near term, I'm paying close attention to what is happening in the Gulf of Alaska. You see, this trough is coming in here by the time we get to the middle of this week. And that's going to shove this ridge that was moving west back toward the east, pushing this trough, which is going to keep us cool through a big part of this week, east with it, okay? So you can see that by the time we get to Friday, into Saturday, and into Sunday, our ridge is now much flatter and much broader, which means, yes, we've got several days coming up of cooler, more seasonable weather. But with this change happening, we're going to go back over into our warmer pattern with time, such that by the time we start the first week of August, we're back there with those above average temperatures again. Why? Look at the troughing over Alaska and western Canada. Look at the troughing sitting between the Hudson Bay and Greenland. These two features in through here are allowing the jet stream to really broaden and bring the heat back to the north with it. So that's what we're seeing. What about precipitation? Remember, the boundary's parked right in through here. Plenty of Atlantic moisture feed, Gulf moisture feed, and as the boundary presses to the south throughout the day on Monday, widely scattered showers and thunderstorms move into North Carolina. But just to your west, on the back side of this, watch it again. Very, very heavy rainfall in the Appalachian Mountains, getting up into parts of Virginia, over toward D.C., and even up the East Coast. So again, where we are here in the Carolinas, hit or miss showers and thunderstorms. I give it about a 70% probability of seeing these today. When they do come through, an abundant amount of moisture, so some brief, very heavy rainfall, and look out for quite a bit of lightning with these storms as well. That gets us out to the middle of the day on Tuesday. Tuesday. Let's keep going here by switching over to our European model. When I give you this map looking at the next 7 days of total accumulated precipitation, we can see that across the United States, it is this quarter that is looking the wettest. We are watching a tropical system that might come into parts of Florida and flirt along the East Coast. Not a hurricane, probably won't even get a name, but we're going to be watching the moisture from this little tropical impulse. A lot of the rain you see right in through here is coming in the next 24 hours, but we're going to see how this progresses through the flow here in the next few moments by looking at the European model. Beginning at 6 a.m. on Monday, again, the main frontal boundary stretched right in through here, so we're going to be watching for that moisture to spread south and east with time. There it goes. So what do we notice? We see that throughout the afternoon on Monday into the evening, widely scattered showers and thunderstorms, some of which could be severe in parts of North Carolina here and in parts of South Carolina. This is the Monday afternoon, evening. This is the overnight hours on Monday getting into Tuesday morning. Main frontal boundary still stretched in this area, and then it pushes right through the Carolinas throughout the day on Tuesday, and that brings in the relief. This is now Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and watch this. What do we see? We see that by the time we get into Wednesday, all we're really going to be seeing here is this broader ridge that's sitting off the page here, pumping moisture into this area, but much bigger area of higher atmospheric pressure sitting right over Illinois by the time we get into Wednesday night, and that is going to suppress a lot of this rainfall pretty far to the south, maybe only clipping parts of the coastal areas of the Carolinas. Now look, as we get into Thursday morning, get into Thursday afternoon, evening, the higher pressure tends to dominate, but we'll have to see how far north we can push that moisture up against the coastline. It looks like it's going to be a relatively drier week after the rainfall for the next 2 days, okay? So we're now to Friday night, getting into the weekend. So this is now Saturday morning. And what ends up happening is that little system that I mentioned that's coming out of the Bahamas, it now might be a weak low pressure system just sitting off the East Coast. But again, this is going to be revolving around that bigger area of higher atmospheric pressure. So let's keep going here. This is Saturday night, getting into Sunday morning. And what do we see? After that pulse of moisture comes through at the beginning of this week, things are relatively dry for the remainder of the week. Now, once we get beyond that, we're losing a lot of our model confidence here, but I don't see any reason with that ridge sliding back to the east once we get into the first full week of August for a lot more hit or miss showers and thunderstorms to return to our area, but certainly a drier time period ahead. Okay, what about this tropical activity? Well, the National Hurricane Center, looking out over the next 5 days, isn't watching anything in the main development region, just watching this little tropical wave sitting here in the Bahamas. And as you saw, it could go just like this and potentially develop into a low pressure system, not a hurricane, sitting in that area. Ocean temperatures right now in the main corridor for which hurricanes tend to form are above average. Still cool in the Gulf of Mexico right into here from Hurricane Barry, but look at this. One of the reasons why that tropical system sitting here doesn't have much of a chance is because over the next 5 days, the wind shear in this corridor is much, much higher than average. Where is it not? Over here. The blue indicates below average wind shear, which means if we did have tropical waves moving through the open Atlantic, it would be a very conducive environment. Part of that is because of the collapse of El Nino. We've actually seen cooler water surface in this area. The warm water's been spread here, and at times we've actually seen some easterly winds, strong easterly trade winds, and that tends to mean that the Atlantic calms down and is much more conducive to tropical activity. All right. Quickly, I just want to finish up by giving you a bit of a global perspective here. Over the next several days, we're watching for a sizable heat wave to kind of invade parts of Western Europe here, while, again, regions just north of the Black Sea, so Ukraine and the Russian wheat belt, which is in through here, seeing some cooler and some wetter weather, especially in eastern Ukraine. But with a highly amplified flow here, with a big ridge pushing in through here, much of our wetter weather is in the troughs, okay? And that is why we see drier for Central Europe, but wetter here on the periphery. The heat does break on Friday, but that comes right back on again for parts of next week as well for Europe. So this is turning into a pretty major weather story for Europe. So if you grow crops in competition there, keep a close eye on that in the coming days. Elsewhere, just want to let you know the Indian monsoon, we've had another resurgence of moisture in the forecast here, and that's because the upper levels of the atmosphere we're seeing over here in the blues are becoming much more conducive to rising motion in India. Also in China's main growing areas here in and around Beijing, both north and south of it, we do see wetter conditions over the next 10 days in that area as well, and not too much in terms of extreme heat. So I wanted to give you that quick global perspective as we wrap up this forecast video. We at Nutrient Ag Solutions and at Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina want to thank you for your attention and hope you look forward to next week's Ag Forecast. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.